On this episode of the podcast, Todd interviews Greg Anderson of Southern Lord Records. For more information, check out their website at southernlord.com.
Hi guys, this is Todd from South Loop Strength and Conditioning, and today I have Greg Anderson on the old Skype machine with me. And Greg is actually the owner of a record label called Southern Lord Records that has released quite a few metal and hardcore experimental drone records and all that type of stuff. They've been active since 1999. Greg plays in two well-known bands called Sunn and Goatsnake. These bands are pretty well known as far as experimental drone in the case of Sunn. Goatsnake is more of a Black Sabbath influenced doom metal type of project. Greg has also been in tons and tons of different bands and projects, collaborated with assorted music freaks like Scott Walker, Boris. Attila has been involved with quite a few Sunn records from Mayhem. So you can check him out on Encyclopedia Metallum for an extensive list of all of his projects that he's been involved with. And Greg is actually going to release my band's record coming up at the end of March. So Greg and I have known each other via the internet and briefly in person for a few months now, and I thought it'd be really cool to actually talk to Greg about kind of the back end stuff that goes on with independent music, an independent record label. Since even though that may not be what we normally talk about on this podcast with, strength training and CrossFit training and recovery and rehab and business and all that type of stuff, but I think there's a lot of fascinating crossover here, especially given my background growing up playing in bands and all that type of stuff. So, Greg, thanks for hanging out with me, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. It's just somewhat different than what usually the usual interview and platform. So I'm stoked. Thanks for thinking of me on this.
Of course, man. I mean, and there's a little self-serving interest here too, in the sense that this Like Rats record is coming out, and we'll link to that in the show notes and all that type of stuff. But you guys can check that out. We have a track streaming right now, and we'll have a full album stream up at some point as well. But yeah, man, I think that this will be cool. I mean, I was going through a bunch of your interviews, kind of researching for this, just what questions have people been asking, all that type of stuff. And I think we can hopefully hit some new topics, as far as the background of the label and all that type of stuff. But let's first talk about, I mean, for my interest, a lot of it lies in, I'm a music freak personally, just in terms of always checking out music, writing riffs, being in bands, things like that. And I think something that's interesting to me is with all your different projects and things like that, how do you actually create the music, right? Is it with Sunn and Goatsnake and all that type of stuff? Is it a collaboration? Do you guys jam? Do you guys improvise? Does one person show up to practice and say, like, all right, guys, like, here's the riffs and we're just going to play it this way? What does that process look like?
Well, for both bands, it's actually pretty different. Goatsnake's kind of more of a traditional, it's a rock band, really, heavy rock band. So, the structures of the songs and, the whole the format or the framework of all the songs is rooted in a very traditional structure of music and blues and rock and metal, but Goatsnake had is kind of a band that's sort of been on and off for the last really for the entire lifespan of the group, and that's because everyone in the band has a lot of other things going on, whether it's family or work or other bands. So it hasn't been a very consistent group. But recently we kind of reconvened, and with the intention of making some new songs because we'd kind of been asked to play like some of these festivals, and it was kind of like almost like we didn't want to turn into a nostalgia act. It was just like relying on the songs that we wrote 15 years ago or whatever, and playing those over and over again. We wanted to write new music together. It was going to be fun to do for one, and really to for us, like, to keep this thing interesting and moving forward, we wanted to write some new music. So the process of writing new music for Goatsnake was really just sort of myself and the drummer mostly just throwing ideas back and forth. Usually it's me that brings in sort of the meat of the song or the riffs, and then the arrangement is kind of put together by both of us. But then our vocalist Pete Stahl, he was also involved this time around too. He was especially with like the actual where the verse goes, where the chorus goes, things like that. Kind of the nuts and bolts of the actual songwriting. So that's kind of Goatsnake. But Sunn is more sort of based off of improvisation, and it's really sort of kind of the chemistry between Stephen O'Malley, the other guitar player, and myself, and there's no rehearsals for the group. The only time that we're basically, if we are getting together, if there is a rehearsal, it's really to try out gear before a tour to make sure everything works, because it's a very massive backline. So it's really that's really kind of the main thing about if we do get together before a tour. Sometimes it's like it really we get together at the sound check before the show, and then that's when we we'll try out the gear or figure out what we're gonna kind of roughly what we're gonna perform that night. But and that's because everyone in the group lives in different places. I'm the only person that lives in the United States now. Everyone else lives in Europe. Steven lives in Paris. Our keyboard player lives in Amsterdam, and our vocalist Attila, he lives in Budapest. So the distance between all of us is doesn't allow us really to practice, but it's not really kind of the band what the band is about. It's more, like I said, an improvisation. So the actual songwriting or creating of the music is again based off the improvisation, and it there's usually somebody, either Steven or myself, will bring in an idea or like a concept, and we work around that. And we usually it's in the studio that we will create new music. And kind of in the moment, which is really to me like a really exciting way to do things. Especially, it's kind of cool to me. It's for me, Goatsnake is a very traditional way of playing and writing music, and Sunn is a very unorthodox way. So they're kind of almost at the opposite extremes of each other. But there's of course very common thread in a lot of the influences and the tone that's used, and it's coming from my brain, so there's a lot of similarities there. Like you can hear, I think you can hear some of the common things with the style of riffs or the tone of the riffs.
Sure. Yeah, and then related to that, I guess in both bands, how do you have quality control over what you release, right? Because, in Goatsnake's situation, it's a little different in terms of saying, okay, cool, we're going to write this song, and then we're going to iterate it as we bring more people in, and then we're going to be like, you know what, that chorus is too long and short. You can kind of change all that stuff. And obviously with Sunn, it's more improvisational, but in both cases, especially with Goatsnake, where it's like, you have these records that are over a decade old that are classics of the genre at some level. And it's like, okay, you're adding another piece to this. How do you say, this holds up to our, our name that we're putting out there?
Well, as far as Goatsnake is concerned, there was a lot of, we put a lot of time and effort into this last record that we released, which was our first record that had been released in like 15 years. So we really... we worked with that. We actually worked with the producer in Nashville that we had worked with on our second album in Los Angeles. So he ended up moving out to Nashville several years ago and starting up a studio there. So he was somebody we really wanted to work with. So he was also very important with everything. We had everything in my, we really rehearsed a lot before we went out there. And we had everything, to me, like, very solid, and there was just a few ideas, and actually there was even some pre-production that was done on that record where he came to Los Angeles. Funny story is he was producing the new Bush album in Los Angeles.
Nice.
And he was like, "Hey man, I'm in town, and this session is it's kind of in, sometimes I'm working, sometimes I'm not. I can never tell, but I'd like to come down and see you guys rehearse pre-production. I can with the songwriting here and there if you guys want." So he did that. He came down and listened to what the songs that we had that we were going to basically end up recording with him later. So that was helpful. So there was a lot of planning that went into that particular that album.
Sure.
So it was but with Sunn, it's more sort of it's just maybe like a few core ideas that we'll bring into a recording studio, and then we'll work on it from there and build on it. And sometimes like the collaborators that end up being on the record, the different instrumentation, a lot of that, it really isn't preconceived. That's kind of comes in as things are developing in the studio. We hear something and somebody has an idea like, hey, wouldn't it be great to put some horns here or some strings here or something like that, or there needs to be some synth here or something like that. So it really sort of organically develops and over time in the studio. There's not really, no one will come in with something completely written and completely conceptualized and all done and just tell people what to play. That's not the way the group works.
Sure. So with Sunn, how much stuff I guess ends up on like the cutting room floor? Because I'm thinking of, are you familiar with Acid Mother's Temple, for example?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that band is just outrageously prolific, and they have amazing releases, and they have horrible releases, and they have stuff kind of in between. And there seems to be like no quality control in terms of what they put out. It's just like, all right, like here's another one, like go for it, guys.
Yeah.
So, how do you guys decide, like, okay, cool, this is actually good enough to release, this is getting what we want to, or like, you know what, like, cut this part, cut that part. What does that process look like?
Well, there is a lot of stuff that doesn't make it. Because really, like, when we go into the studio, we really sort of just let the tape run, so to speak. And it's more about a lot of the records are heavily edited. There's there'll be like we'll just basically play, and we'll go back and listen, and there's key moments that happen that we try to pick out and edit. Some stuff's not edited at all. Some stuff's played as it's recorded, and even the final song or piece is exactly how we recorded it. But a lot of the Sunn stuff, especially on the last two records that we've done, the Canon and Monoliths and Dimensions, it's about finding those kind of key moments and key parts of. I'm talking about like between a 20 and 30 minute piece, and so we basically will pare that down in somewhere anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes usually, depending. But so there's a lot of kind of stuff that's done after the recording that is just as important as far as the final piece of music, and a lot, like I said, a lot of that's editing, and then there's a lot of layering that happens as far as like, okay, we're going to add some instrumentation to this, or add a different collaborate with someone else on this piece. So a lot of that's done sort of later, and it's really. Everything for Sunn starts with the core of Steven and I, the two guitars, or sometimes it's bass and guitar, but that's where it starts, and then it's kind of built upon from there.
Sure. So when you're going through that editing process, is that you and Steven kind of sitting there at the Pro Tools or whatever, firing through stuff, or is everyone involved in the record there? Is there one lead creative voice on that, or is that also a collaborative process?
That's a collaboration. Well, and that's a collaboration. Steven and I, and then our the engineer producer, which is we've worked with the same person for several years now, which is this guy Randall Dunn. He was also our live sound person for many years until just recently, and he decided to step away from doing live sound and just concentrate on studio work. But he's very important part of it as well. Most of it, it's kind of Steven and I are sort of the the majority of it, but he's very skilled and he's got great ideas as well. So it's sort of, ends up being a lot of the decisions are sort of, mutually between the three of us. But we're all very hands-on as far as the final thing. There's never a moment where Steven and I, or at least one of us, is there to sort of oversee what's going on. That we're always involved. So I mean, that's kind of why, from a technical standpoint, or what what you see on the records, it always says produced by Sunn, because that's we don't leave the the recording studio and leave it into someone else's hands. We're very hands on with that. As much as possible. And like I said, sometimes one person will step out based on if they got something going on in their lives. Like for me, it was like, I've got 3 kids, so there's been times when I've had to step out because of family obligations. But it's always, we're very hands on about it. And it's, to me, honestly, the group, I think some of this has to do with kind of our upbringing into underground music, especially hardcore and punk rock. Is everything we do it's total DIY. I mean, we don't have a management. The only outside help that we have for the group actually is a booking agent. So everything else that we, all the finances, every decision and every move that is made with the group is made by us, like mutually agreed upon decision. And we do everything ourselves. So we handle we put out our own records on the Southern Lord label. We have our own merch store that we run and do the fulfillment for. So it's very, everything we do from from starting with the music and the way it's presented to all the business and everything like that is very is handled. It's all hands on. It's all us.
Yeah, for sure. And then sort of in that vein, right? I mean, you mentioned the hardcore and punk background, right? Where I think a lot of that DIY culture grew out of, well, no one is going to do this for us, so we have to do it ourselves. And then simultaneously, that gives you more creative control, right? You have control over your image. You have control over, what you're going to spend on X, Y, Z. You don't have to give a cut of whatever you're doing to some management company, all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of benefits to that DIY mentality if you have, the wherewithal to get it done. So can you give me just a basic history of Southern Lord as far as getting that started, since that label is also run similarly, right?
Yeah, it's for sure, and Sunn is an extremely important part of the label. But I mean, basically, I grew up in Seattle and played in a lot of bands there, and that's where Steven and I first met and started playing music together in the mid '90s. We had a band called Thor's Hammer together that was kind of a very slow death metal band, very very influenced by Hellhammer and Celtic Frost and.
I'm gonna interrupt you and tell you that I first heard Thor's Hammer and I didn't know that it was you, right? I was aware of Goatsnake and Sunn and all that, and I heard Thor's Hammer just like independently and was like, this is insane, like I love this so much. And then at some point I like made the connection where I was like, wait, holy shit, this is the same guys, like what's going on here? So anyway, go on. Sorry.
Pretty raw stuff. Yeah. So we started that was the first time we started playing music together in I think it was 1994, 95 that we did that. And it was a very short-lived band because the vocalist was, she was this Norwegian exchange student, and she, her program basically ended, and she moved back to Norway. So the band dissolved after that. But you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So after that band dissolved, we formed another band without her, she was gone, called Burning Witch. It was kind of continuing on into the same vein as Thor's Hammer, but it was more, the music was a little bit more developed, and it was really kind of embracing doom a lot more, especially like we were really into I Hate God and St. Vitus and Winter and so the songs were, I think the songwriting was a little bit more mature than our first group together. But anyways, so both bands had recorded material, and then I moved to Los Angeles to. I just needed a change. I needed to get out of Seattle. I wanted to. I had an opportunity to play with some musicians down here, which ended up becoming Goatsnake. Left, and those recordings basically sat. There's a few labels that were interested, but nothing ever happened. And the bass player for Goatsnake was a huge fan of those records, and he was like, "Man, you got to get these. You got to put these out." I'm like, "Yeah, it'd be great. I just don't have any money." So he actually loaned me the money. He goes, "I'm going to loan you the money. You pay me back in 1 year." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So we did it, and
did you guys sign a term sheet on that?
No, just he was just a good friend and super into the music, and
sure.
And really smart dude. It's funny, that guy now runs the European office of Southern Lord. So we've remained friends for all this time, and he's really into the music and gets it. And he's like a family member, So, anyways, he loaned me the money, and the whole point at first was just to get those two recordings out, the Thor's Hammer demo and the Burning Witch demos, and that was it. I was like, okay, let's get these out, and hopefully we make our money back, and I can pay off my loan and to my friend, and then that was it. But the response was so strong, and people really got into it, and it really it inspired me to keep going and do some more stuff. So. I was able to pay back that loan, and then just kept it going from there. And it was really so. I mean, at first, the aspirations were extremely modest, and we just wanted to get those two CDs out. It wasn't even vinyl; it was just CDs, and it, like I said, it kind of created this domino effect where it's like really was inspiring by the response that we were getting, and people were getting really into it. And we had some other cool ideas of other releases that we wanted to do, and we just kept it going. And that's kind of how it's been ever since. We've been inspired to keep this rolling, and keep the momentum going, and really grateful that we've we've been able to. People have gotten really into it, and we have a following of people that are into what's on the label.
Sure. So it's kind of like you made music you wanted to hear, and then you figured out a way to put it out yourself, and just sort of struck the right chord with the right group of people, and pretty quickly realized, like, hey, listen, like, this is something that that people want, that we can provide, and just kind of snowball.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it was also, there's like, it's really, you're talking about being obsessed with music and new music. I mean, that's how I've always been, really. Really, and that's what really sort of got me into underground music, is because I was like a kid that grew up listening to AC/DC and Van Halen and Led Zeppelin, and when I first heard Metallica, I heard them. I got the Kill 'Em All record, and that was kind of the game changer for me at that point, because it really sort of opened my eyes to all this underground music, and eventually from Metallica and Slayer and things like that. Then it was like, then I discovered hardcore.
Sure.
Then it was like this thing, like, okay, I'm on a quest to see what the fastest music there is, because I was so into hearing fast music. I thought it was incredible. It was a revelation to me. And then it was like, when I first heard Kill 'Em All, I was like, okay, this is the fastest. It doesn't get any faster.
Can anyone ever play faster?
Yeah, no one's going to top that. And then, and then I met there were some kids at my high school. They're like, dude, that's not even fast.
It's not even fast.
DRI, yeah. So then I heard DRI and COC and some of these, a bunch of the old hardcore bands, Die Kreuzen and all this stuff. And it's like, so it just, really kind of opened up the floodgates. Like, but that passion for music is something that's kind of always sustained for me, and that's kind of, I was really into, in the 80s, once I got into punk and hardcore and underground metal stuff, I was really into tape trading. And so I kind of, to me, like, this label is sort of like tape trading on steroids in the modern day and age now for me, where it's like I still really like this music, and I'm really excited about sharing it with people and turning people onto the music and being turned on to other music myself by, either discovering it or, somebody, a friend or somebody suggesting something to me. And so it's that's kind of where, it still is today what it was back in 97 when we were 98 when we were trying to put out our first put out these first CDs.
Yeah, the scaling up and systematizing the tape trading into a label that makes perfect sense, right? It's just like, cool, this is what I'm into, you should check it out. Like, I guess I'm gonna send this to a few thousand people rather than just my few friends.
Totally. Well, and it's also, the inspiration really kind of comes from, seeing what other stuff that's coming out on other labels. I mean, a lot of it's, and I'm not gonna name anything specific labels or bands, but I just see a lot of stuff. There's a lot of garbage out there, man. And it's kind of like, I'm not saying that, we're the best in what we do. We're everyone else is most people are shit. I would never say that. It's just I think that a label, independent label run by musicians, to me, sort of has an advantage to a label that's not run by musicians in several ways. I think there's that connection to the music and playing it, and the kind of the empathy that you have with other musicians that bigger labels or labels that aren't run by musicians don't have. And that's kind of one of the things that I really, what to me sets our label apart from a lot of other labels and what we do. To me, there's a lot of, what I'm seeing is there's a lot of true passion in what we do, and other labels that are run by musicians, but not really seeing that same sort of enthusiasm in some of these other independent labels that aren't run by musicians. And I think that it's not that they're not putting out good stuff. I don't see that, but their focus and motivation is a lot of times way more financial driven than a true passion for the music, and wanting to play that music and be involved in the actual creation of music. It's a lot more, I think, more. It's like I said, I think it's more financially focused. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I think me, where I'm standing, that's sort of what drives us also. Is like, is this true passion for the music? You know what I mean?
Sure. And then kind of,
I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't really make this, for better or for worse, we really don't make decisions based on whether it's going to actually sell or not. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been really lucky. We've had some artists on the label that have done extremely well, and it's really helped us. It's made all the difference. But I like all that music. I'm not putting out a record because it will sell. I have turned down so many records that have gone on to do extremely well, and it's been people that know me and I've told the story about that band, and they're like, man, are you regretting that? Are you kicking yourself? The band's huge. You could have made a fortune. It's like, no, I don't like the band.
Yeah, I didn't like the record. Whatever, man.
I don't like the band. I can't stand behind something like that. So, and I know a lot of other labels that's not the case. It's like, hey, man, this is going to make us a lot of money. Let's do it. So, I think that's one thing that, for, like I said, for better, for worse, we probably could have been a lot more successful if I would have taken the opportunity when it was in my hands. But that's not really what it's about for me. I can't stand behind something that I don't completely love and think it's killer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And then on that note, I guess with marketing, right? So in my industry with CrossFit, marketing is kind of like a dirty word almost. It's like, that's that sleazy bullshit. Like, fuck that. The quality of our product has to stand for itself. Which at some level I'm sympathetic to, but at another level, you need to do something to get people to be aware that your product is good. And I see something similar in the music industry, right? Where it's like, yeah, you want to put out the bands that you like. You want to, with your label only put out stuff that you stand behind. But how do you approach, I guess, marketing without sort of crossing that line of like doing stuff you're not comfortable with, or ethically doing something that you don't agree with?
Just kind of just go with a lot of that stuff. Kind of go with, and also the wallets, the money. I mean, Southern Lord is run. All our deals with our artists are based on a profit split. So it's really sort of, it's kind of a party put in the effort to get the best. Think. With that said, I really try to be mindful of. I'm actually pretty extremely conservative with spending with advertising like that, and these different co-op programs with record stores and things like that. I will only do it if it's going to this area. I mean, there's a lot of labels that basically have a formula. It's like, well, you're going to spend much money to this much, but it turns it into a gamble, and I just don't, I don't feel comfortable doing that with the records. I don't think it should be. It's not a gamble. It's a piece of art that needs to be handled with respect and carefully, and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. So I'm always very conservative with things, and I've actually had issues with bands where they thought I wasn't spending enough money, and then at that point, well, it's like, okay, well, we can talk about opening up the wallet a little bit more if that's what you feel about it. I wanted everyone to be satisfied with what's going on, but I think most people respect what we're doing and respect the fact that we're conservative, because there's a lot of, you can kind of get yourself into some traps. There's like basically a lot of stuff that's just kind of pre-designed and set up to take your money, but you're not really going to see much of a return, or it doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? It's not really going to result in sales. You know what I mean? It's just it's like I have a lot of issues personally with press and magazines and the way that they're kind of set up and their design. It's kind of a pay game that I think is lame. I really don't care for majority of magazines that are out there, especially these days too. To me, playing for being completely level with the online zines, because now you can a lot more people are going to those, and I think it's the same was. I'm of like a fanzine myself, but there's a lot of those left anymore, unfortunately, sure. Because it's all online now, and you can hear anything at your fingertips, and you can find out about anything really easily online. So picking up a magazine like we would do in the 80s and the 90s, that's how I found about a lot of punk and hardcore, Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside magazine and shit like that. It's like that's how you find out about stuff, but you don't need that anymore. Better for worse. It's like now you have more control, and you're being exposed to more through online. So that to me that's free. So sure. You don't spend money on advertising and stuff like that with these magazines and kind of playing their games so that they'll feature your bands. I think it's bullshit, to be honest with you. So, but yeah, I mean, bottom line, we're conservative with it. We sure. Try to, we're very careful, because it's not just our money. I look at it as the band's money too, and their art. So I try to be very respectful and careful with it.
And then sort of on that note, you're effectively saying that Southern Lord is your curated selection of music for people to listen to, and then
mm-hmm.
Based upon your track record, the bands you've been in, you sort of have a tribe of followers, right? They're like, dude, Greg Anderson, like if he likes it, I want to know about it. So that's that's kind of at some level living the dream, where you sort of built up this tribe of folks who want to hear what you have to say. Do you do anything, I guess, to create that group or to drive that beyond just doing a good job and putting out stuff that you want to hear?
I don't know. Yeah, I think that's pretty much, I think he kind of nailed it in a way. I mean, but I got to say, man, I mean, that's something that I don't take lightly, like that. So it's like kind of that position that I'm in. I feel real honored to be there, but I kind of, I don't look at it as, I don't really necessarily look at it as being above anybody, or, I look at it as more like just, hey, people like good, like good music. They should hear. I feel like they should hear the music. That's important for me, for people to hear the music that we're putting out. But no, I mean, I feel like we really we definitely, the consistency and of the quality of what we're releasing really speaks volumes, and I think that is what has sort of helped push this forward and amass this following of people that we have, because I think there's, there's a lot of labels that kind of come and go, and there's several different reasons for that, but we've managed to sustain and I'd like to think can be consistent with what we're doing, even though the music styles have kind of gone through different phases, you could say. There's been kind of different things that we've sort of embraced and started putting out over the years. There's still, to me, there's still a lot of similarities, and there's these subtle threads, subtle and not so subtle threads that tie everything together, and I think that's for me, kind of the reason for bringing in different styles of music into the label is really kind of twofold. Like, for one, I like the music. I'm really into all kinds of different music. I don't want to be limited by just one thing, and I think that it keeps it interesting for people too. It's like if we only released doom metal records, I mean, to me, it's like that's very limiting. It's very limiting. I like that music a lot, but I think it's like I don't want to eat. I don't want to have Italian food every single day of the week. I'd like to throw it into some Mexican here and there, and then like maybe go some Greek here and there. So it's like having some variety to me is very important, and also sort of, to me, one of the reasons that this is, the label is still around and people are getting into it.
I did want to ask you about Scott Walker too, where I was like, I want to know everything about that fucking guy, man. It's like Andy and I were talking about it because we're like, I feel like if I had to, like, I could like get in touch with Dave Grohl. Like, if you're like, dude, you like if you don't find Dave Grohl, like, I'm gonna kill your parents or whatever, you'd be like, all right, I can like figure this out. But like, I don't feel like I could like track down Scott Walker.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely reclusive, and that whole experience was very was very surreal, because I'd been listening to his records for a while and a huge fan of his work, but he's one of those kind of people or personalities that you just know that I just don't think there's ever going to be a chance that, first of all, he doesn't play live, so there's no chance for you to see him perform live, and then getting to meet him just seems like something that's just never going to happen. It was very strange, and it was we were talking earlier about the way that Sunn records records. It's very sort of in the moment, and one guy will bring in an idea, and then build upon that. Well, this one was actually done completely different. He had everything completely written, scored, and charted. Everything.
Oh, dude, he like charts out like weird noises and shit. He's like, here's the symbol for like banging on meat. Like, oh, all right, cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you've seen the documentary. Yeah, exactly. So his musical director was there, and that guy is basically like a conductor of orchestra, conducts orchestras in London, and he works with Scott, and basically him and Scott, he helps Scott get his ideas scored and kind of interprets some of Scott's ideas, and so that in a formal way. So he had everything done for us, and we would basically showed up with our gear, and they had just told us what they wanted us to play, which for us was we were totally into it because we'd never done it before. Plus it was we're playing with somebody we had a lot of respect for and love his music. But it was interesting because we recorded under the assumption that we were just basically going to be his backing band for his new solo record.
Yeah.
And after the recording session, like kind of near the end of it, it was going so well, and he was actually bringing in songs. He brought out some songs and some ideas that were just, he hadn't finished yet, that were just demo, just he had very rough demos, and we'd finished everything with a couple days to spare of what was scheduled. So he brought more songs out, but because of the collaboration that we had and what actually happened in the studio and the recording, he decided to not make it a solo record. He decided to make it a collaboration record where both artists were named on the cover of the record, which I thought was really an honor, I mean, he still was really the brains behind it all. I mean, like I said, he wrote all the music, and we weren't allowed to go to the mix section, and we weren't allowed to. We never heard or saw the vocals being tracked. What we did the demos that he gave us of the music, he didn't sing on them, but he used a Fender Rhodes
to like play the vocal
to represent his voice. Yes. So that's all we had. So really, when we left there, it's like we really had no idea what it was going to be like. We didn't leave. They didn't let us leave with any recordings at all. So the next thing I got in the mail was like, here's a rough mix of the album, basically, with the vocals like recorded on it. And it was like, whoa, because we'd been listening to those melodies a lot, right. We'd heard them, we knew what they were. So to hear then actual a voice replace those, the keyboard was very bizarre. And I guess, what we were told was that's how he records everything. But the one thing, there is one thing like it was really cool about that I really thought was awesome was that Keith showed up every day to the studio. Because we weren't too sure if like we were even going to have much interaction with him at all.
Sure.
But he was there every day. I mean, he didn't stay for the whole day, but he was there and that was the thing, like, that's what determined where we recorded what studio we recorded in. It had to be within a 5-minute walk of his house. And or close to it,
Yeah.
he doesn't drive, and he doesn't want to drive, and he doesn't want anyone to pick him up. He wants to be able to walk from his house to the studio. So, luckily he lives in this area that has a lot of amazing studios.
Many options within a 5-minute walk.
Yeah, it was seriously, there was even a studio called Sunn. There was like a Sunn Studios, like SUN. It was SUN, not two N's, but so it was there's this one street there that literally, I'm not joking, they had 4 different like recording studios, and some of them were
the recording district.
Yeah, it was the recording district of London. It was like very, very strange that he lived there, but so it was cool, and he was our interaction with him was it was really cool. It was very friendly, and he had a lot of respect for us and what we were doing, and he thought it was he had a lot of ideas he had some ideas that weren't on the demo, and he would try to explain them to us, and we were able to interpret most of those ideas, and he was very excited about that. He's like, man, usually people don't get it, or I'll have to compromise with something that's not what I was hearing in my head, but you guys have been able to help me realize a lot of these ideas, because we literally brought our entire back line, and we brought all these different pedals and all these different guitars, and we wanted to have a lot of options because we figured there might be an opportunity to make some some really different sounds on this stuff, and that's exactly what he wanted. It's kind of we were right, we were correct with our intuition there, and it was like. It was cool. You'd be like, well, I kind of have this idea for like this lead guitar part here, and Steven and I can't play lead at all, really. But the keyboard player, the keyboard player that we play with is like this ripping guitar player as well. He's one of my favorite guitar players. So, and he's like a Hendrix style guitar player. So, we were like, well, we can't, but Toss can do a ripping lead, and sure enough, just like first take, nailed it. Like just how Scott was wanting it, and it was just like it was kind of like we were like these we were kind of like these backup musicians for hire that like had this massive, massive amount of tool, all these tools in our toolboxes to fix, to make everything, to fix everything. It was pretty wild. It was really cool. Like, so by the end of the session, everyone was like, the vibe was very, it was very positive. Everyone's like, wow, this really went well. We're really excited. And I think that's one of the reasons he decided to rename the album, and involve us with the as the artist as well. So it was cool. It was a really cool experience, and it was, to me, honestly, that was like, I was just there to absorb and learn. I went there just a sponge. I wanted to soak up as much as I possibly could, because it's such a very rare opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot, and I was really tried to just, I tried to be pretty quiet and just do my thing. And, whereas usually in a Sunn recording session, I'm very vocal and I have specific vision and ideas for things. But this time I was like, all right, let's just let someone else steer the ship, and I'm going to learn some things here. And, it was, dude, this is funny though. You'll love this. So when we first met, he's like, oh, so, he's very shy and he's very quiet. He's like, hey, so you run the Southern Lord label? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, man, you put out that Nails record? Like, yeah, I really like Nails. They're great. I was like, that was the first thing he said to me. It was like,
that's incredible.
Oh, yeah, it was like very strange.
Dude,
like, of all the things
Scott Walker's on B9. He's posting on the Bridge 9 board.
I thought that was like the most bizarre, like, of all the things that we put out, that's what he like was really into. He's like, man, I love that new record you put out. I think it was Abandon All Life had come out.
Dude, you know what though? That's like John Peel though, right? Where it's like, he's this music freak guy, and it's just like, dude, this Napalm Death stuff is insane. Like, let me expose this to every like person in Britain. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, good job. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, totally. That's a good good analogy. I mean, I think, and that's kind of when he said that, then I was kind of like, you know what, this guy's probably a lot like us, just a music freak, and loves to hear new music, and it doesn't matter, whether it's Nails or it's Diamant de Galas or whatever. It's like, it's about whether the connection's made there, and he likes the music. It doesn't matter what kind of style. Or it was like that right there. I was like, oh man, this is going to be cool. We're going to get along fine. You know what I mean? The guy gets it.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I love that story. So yeah, I want to be respectful of your time. So let's wrap this thing up.
Okay.
Is there any sort of last things you want people to check out? Places they can find out more about Southern Lord on the internet, Sunn, Goatsnake, all that type of stuff?
Well, I would just say, I mean, as far as locally there, you got some amazing record stores, Reckless Records, of course, and but of course, if you want to get the stuff directly from the label, it's southernlord.com. We've got a store there, and it's an exciting year. We got an exciting year coming up this year. We got a lot of great releases, including this Like Rats record, which I'm really excited about, and we got a new record coming from Power Trip, which is a band that really exciting, new, amazing band. Totally stoked to work with those guys, and then come see our bands when we play in Chicago. Sunn's playing in Chicago at the Talia Hall on June 7th.
Yeah, I have that in my calendar.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It should come down. It should be really good. We're playing with two other really new Southern Lord bands. One's called Big Brave. It's a Canadian band. They're amazing. And then the other guitar player in Sunn, his little brother is in the other opening band. They're called Hissing, and it's like kind of like Autopsy, Incantation style death metal band. They're incredible. These are super young dudes, but they're really, really, really good. So it's going to be cool, like a really kind of a diverse bill and really cool show. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, that sounds good.